Hello, Miss Steele here. So we are talking about value this week, and we're also talking about form. So we're going to be using both to draw a pear, and we're going to try to make it look like it has form, like it's 3D. So for this project, you want a white piece of paper, a pencil, and an eraser. I have a sharpener because we're going to need colored pencils, and then markers. Now, if you don't have the markers, that's okay. But the colored pencils are going to help us add some shading onto the markers. So if you don't have markers to lay down your base, you could just do it in colored pencils. So our first step is drawing a pear. Now drawing a pear seems like it'd kind of be a funky shape, but it's not too hard, and we want to draw lightly because we don't want these lines to show up later on. So what I'm going to do is, towards the bottom of my paper, I'm going to draw a circle very lightly. And it's going to be pretty large. What I'm going to do above this circle is draw a second circle, and I'm going to try to make this one quite a bit smaller. And I'm going to put it right on top like that. It's harder for you to see because it's so light with the camera focusing. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually connect these together to make my pear shape. And to do that, I'm going to draw a curved line connecting them on the side. And now what I can do is I can press a little bit harder for the outline of my pear shape, and then I'm going to go back and actually erase all these lines, but since I'm pressing a little bit harder, I'll still be able to see this base shape. As well, I'm going to add a little line here on top, and then I'm going to add my stem using kind of a skinny triangle. So I'm going to get these lines erased, and then we'll move on to our next step. And if yours doesn't look exactly like mine, that's okay. Pears kind of come in all sorts of funky shapes. I erased my pencil lines, but if you look very close, you can see that I can still see the outline of my shape. So now I want to pick the base color for my pear, which is why we have the markers. We're going to put markers down first, and then add some details using the colored pencils. So pears come in a lot of colors. They come in all different shades of green. There are some pears that are more yellow, some pears that are more red, some pears that are more brown. So whatever base color you'd like to do is kind of up to you. I'm going to pick a lighter green color, and whenever I color this in, I don't want this to come out with like a lot of smudgy sort of like sections that might be darker than others. So what I would suggest is using the tip of your marker, and not making a random spot like I did right there, but we can fix that later on. But I use the tip of my marker to outline, and then I use the edge of my marker to color in. And that way, I think it gets colored in the quickest, and it's not as streaky as whenever you kind of color in random patches. So I like to just start filling it in using the edge of my marker, so I can get my base color down to go back and add some shading on top of. So I'm going to get this colored in, and I'm also going to get my stem colored in. You could use a cream color, you could use a brown color for your stem, and then again for the base of your pear for whatever color you want to use to lay down first. Whatever color you want to use to lay down first is up to you. Like I said, you can do pretty much any shade of green. You could do reds, yellows, or even like some creams or browns. I'm going to start with a lighter green, and I'm going to get this colored in using my marker first, and then we'll move on to our next step. Alright, so I have this all filled in. I'm going to set my markers aside because I will need them later. And what I want to do is I want to pull out a few colors. I want to pull out a gray, a white, a black. This is how we can add our tint tones and shades. And as well, I want to pull out some greens that are kind of close to this that I could use to add more shadow, or even if I have a lighter green, I could use that green to kind of lay down a highlight. So I'm just pulling out some greens that I think are close to this one, and then I am going to get them sharpened so they're good to go, so we can start filling in those shadows and those highlights on this to really give it some form, to really make it look like it is 3D. going to do for this is we're going to pick one side to be our lighter side, like light is coming onto it, and then the other side to be our shadow side. So before I jump in with my black and my white, I'm going to use like some browns and some greens and some softer colors, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold kind of far back on my colored pencil, and I'm going to start building up some shadows. And because I'm holding farther back, it's going to be a little bit harder to apply too much pressure. So I can start putting in some shadows, and what I want to do is make one side my darker side, which I've chosen this side to be my darker side, and I'm going to start adding in some shadows for the shape of my pears. So I'm going to follow just right along the edge of it, and then as I come in, I'm going to get a little bit lighter. So I'm going to press even lighter, and because this is my shadow side, I'm going to add quite a bit of shadow. And I'm going to do this using this brown, and then I can go back with my black and I can make it a little bit darker. And what I can do as well is add a little bit of shadow in where my stem is coming from. If I want to make this kind of lumpy and bumpy, I can add some shadows where some lumps might be. So I think I want to add some shadows like right here in the middle, almost like there's a bump and kind of like a curve around right here. So I'm going to work out a shadow. So there's a bump kind of here in the middle, and then just a little bit of shadow on this side. So you can see I came in a lot more with this other side. For my light side, I'm just going to add a little bit of shadow on the side here at the top, and then a little bit on the bottom, and then I'm going to add some highlight right next to those. And wherever I add in a little lump or bump, like what you see me doing right here, where I decide I might want to add some more shadow to make it look like it has a bump, I'm going to add some highlight next to it too to really push that kind of bumpy sort of shape. I can even add one up here if I'd like maybe there's another bump right here. And then here on the bottom, because the bottom of our pear is a little bit rounder, I'm going to add just a little bit more shadow, but nothing like I did for the other side. So I'm going to layer this up a little bit, and then we can grab our next color. I'm going to blend this out with a little bit of a darker green. So I purposefully added a green that's pretty close to the color that I'm using, so I can help blend in that brown a little bit. So if you used red, you might be using a more red color. If you used brown, you might be using more of a brown color. But I'm just using a color that's similar to the color of my pear, so I can help work those shadows a little bit more. So I'm going to keep going with this, and then we'll work on adding in our highlights and adding in those deep dark lowlights using black. So I'm just going over a few places that I put in that brown just to push them a little bit more. I'm not pressing too hard because it's always easier to add more, but it's kind of harder to go back and add less. So I'm just adding in my green over my brown a little bit, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab a lighter color. I'm not going to go in with white yet, but I'm going to use this lighter sort of yellowy green color I had. So for this, if you have a red apple, you might be using like a pink color. And I'm going to add in a highlight next to where I put in those kind of lumpy, bumpy sections. You don't have to add these in, or you could add them in different areas. I just wanted my pear to look like it had some more texture. And now what I'm going to do is I'm really going to add in a bunch here at the top for a highlight, kind of going down the side. And then all on this light side, I'm going to layer some in here. And this will help me know where to put my white as well. And I can also add some onto my stem. So now I have my shading that I'm building up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my black and come along where I want the shading to be the darkest and just push that value a little bit darker by adding in this black. So for my darker side, I'm going to blend it out a little bit more. And then for this lighter side, I'm almost just going to line it just a little bit. So I'm going to line along the side right here just to push that value a little bit darker. And then I'm going to do the same over here, but I'm going to blend it out a little bit more just so we can make that value a little bit darker. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll add our highlights, our shadow, and we'll move on to our last step. Alright, so I added some of that black in, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my white colored pencil, and I'm going to come where I want the highlights to be the lightest. I need to resharpen it, which would be anywhere where I put in that lighter color earlier. And I'm going to add in just a few little highlighted areas using white. So anywhere I added a bump, I'm going to add a little bit of white there in that section. A little bit of white in the middle of this section. If you added a bump, like I did, I added 2 in the middle here of that pear. You want to add some white in there. And then all along the edge right here, you want to add a little bit more white. So what we're doing is we're using the colored pencil and we're layering it on top of the ink from that marker so we can get a highlight. I'm going to add some up here. So I'm going to layer on some white, and then we'll move on to our last step. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a shadow to the side of our pear, and I'm going to draw a pear shape. So I'm going to add 1 lump coming in, and then a little bit of a smaller lump like that. So it doesn't have to be the exact shape of the pear. And then I'm lightly going to fill this in so we can have a shadow that our pear is casting, which really helps push that form idea. And now this last step, I like to do just because I think it adds some more focus onto our pear, but I'm going to choose a marker. I'm also going to make it a little bit darker closer to the pear, just because where it's closer, the shadow would be darker, like that. What I'm going to do now is I like to add this in as a final step just because I really think it makes the pear pop, and it also helps us make the edges really, really clean. But you want to pick out a marker. It can really be any marker, and what we're going to do is we're going to outline our pear and then fade it out using a colored pencil that is close to that shade. So I think I want to try for pink. So I'm going to check the color of my colored pencil and then grab my pink marker to see how close they are, to see if it would look good kind of layered next to each other, because I want one that is a similar color to it. And I think those are close enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline my pear, and I'm going to use the edge of my marker so I can really make the edges look sharp. And then I'm going to follow this outline 2 or 3 times out, depending on how thick your marker is, just a little bit like that. So I'm going to go all the way around my pear, and then I'm going to blend it out using the colored pencil. Okay, so now I've outlined my apple. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a colored pencil close, and I'm going to slowly blend it out. So I'm going to press harder and then lighter as I get to the edge. And I think that'll just add a nice little like addition to this to really draw in attention to the apple. And it also helps it look a little less plain, and it gives you another chance to practice controlling value with colored pencils. So I make it lighter and lighter as I get to the outside. Like that. So I'm going to go all the way around my apple and add some shading, pressing harder where the marker is, and then slowly fading out all the way around my pear. And I can always go back and layer it too if I feel like it needs some more value. So I'm going to work on this whole thing, and then we will be finished. My pear with form and value is all finished. I can't wait to see how yours come out and what colors you decide to use. I think the green and the pink look kind of cool together, but whatever color combination you pick, I'm sure will be fantastic as well. Have a wonderful rest of your morning, your evening, your afternoon, whenever you're watching this. I'll see you next time. Bye.